Penn State football fans, we are getting closer to the Super Bowl. That means Johnny McGonigal is getting closer to just crazy pants situation. And he's holding up well. I saw him in State College yesterday for a Penn State media availability. I think he's holding up really well. I know he's getting nervous. It's the Blue White Breakdown podcast. Johnny, am I accurate in saying you're holding up well, or are you starting to get a little bit nuts?
Well, look, Bob, when you drive up to State College on Tuesday and then you drive back on Wednesday from the Philly area to and from, it's about 6 hours in the car. Do a lot of soul searching. Listen to a lot of podcasts, a lot of like Super Bowl related podcasts. It was great when I was being reassured about how the Eagles running game is going to match up with the Chiefs. It was a little worrying when you hear that Travis Kelce averages like 17 yards per catch on a crossing route, and you have to worry about TJ Edwards and Kaiser White covering him, or CJ Johnson. It was a lot. It was a lot to take in. I think I'm doing well. We're recording this Wednesday afternoon. Got a few more days to get through. This week feels like it's been like just dragging along. Tuesday was nice. Obviously work-wise, we get a lot of interviews and a lot of access. The day went by quick, so that was nice. But yeah, I'm looking forward to Sunday in a big way. But Tuesday was big for our work, for our jobs, covering Penn State football.
Yep.
Talking to James Franklin for the first time since the Rose Bowl, getting formally introduced to new wide receivers coach Marcus Higgins, which you wrote about, and then talking to the 2022 freshmen, the 2022 recruiting class that was such a driving force and factor behind Penn State's 11-2 Rose Bowl winning season. Talked to Nick Singleton, which I wrote about, Drew Allar, stories coming up on him and Abdul Carter and the whole bunch. So it was an eventful day, and one that definitely helped get me through the week a little bit.
All right, you're just look at it this way: you're less than a week away. We're going to talk again later this week on a second podcast. I don't know what your state of mind will be in another 24 hours, but you're just like every other Eagles fan. So you guys are like a band of brothers and sisters. It's a family affair for sure if you're an Eagles fan. So I would have a funny feeling, John, by the time Friday rolls around, if I asked you a question similar to the one I just asked you, you might be a little bit more frantic, but frantic in a good way. But let's
I was going to say I'm the opposite way. I get nervous early in the week before a big Eagles game, and then as it gets close to kickoff, once I crack a cold one and sit down,
sure.
I'm like, oh, they're winning 38-10, easy. So I work my way up that way. I do it in reverse. So
all right. Well, just keep your hands away from your FanDuel account if you're feeling like they're going to win by 28. I don't want you to do anything you might regret. But of all the things that happened this week, you mentioned all of them. We're taping this early afternoon on Wednesday. The seven Penn Staters got scouting combine invites. But I really think we can get to that. But I really do think that we should probably focus on some of the things. We can't get to everything that happened on Tuesday, but between the players, between Marcus Higgins' 30-minute session with the media, and between James kind of recapping the 2023 signing class, and also I thought he had some very significant things to say in some other areas. Since it's your Super Bowl, it's Eagles week, where do you want to start?
Let's start. I think there was just a general tone, whether it was with Franklin, obviously the introduction of Higgins, and talking to those freshmen. There was a general tone and theme of moving on, from 2022. They're wrapping up the 23 recruiting class, bringing in Jim Diona, the 4-star offensive tackle. James touched on that. He touched on some of the transfers that they brought in. There was a general tone, though, of like, hey, we're winter workout started that morning. Spring camp is on the horizon. There was a general tone of like, hey, we're moving this thing forward. And I thought that was interesting to hear from the freshmen in particular. And I wrote about Nick Singleton, and I talked to him for an extended period of time about how he still gets the Rose Bowl run, the 87-yard record setter. He still gets that video and highlight sent to him from buddies, people back home. He's from Shillington and went to Governor Mifflin. People back home in Berks County are still talking about that. But he has said, hey, I'm focused on what's next. I'm focused on being a sophomore, not a freshman. I'm focused on helping this Penn State offense in 2023, an offense that is going to be without some key leaders. And I'm going to be interested to see who from that 2022 recruiting class steps up as leaders. And I think Singleton could be one of them. So there was just that general tone of like, hey, like that was nice. 11-2, that was really cool. The Rose Bowl was really cool. But we're on to, as Bill Belichick once said, hey, we're on to Cincinnati. Penn State is on to 2023. They're on to a season that has high expectations that, people are setting from the outside and from the inside, internally and externally.
Yeah, and one thing I would say is, and I think you could probably relate to this because you were on the beat as well. It's a different world now in college football at Penn State because James had talked about, hey, the leadership last year that's moved on is as good as we've ever had at Penn State. He's in his 10th year. But I think what I would say though also is when you get all those contributions from true freshmen and second-year players that are back, and when you have access to the transfer portal to kind of bring in 2 or 3 players that the way that they do it, Johnny, their track record says that if they bring in 4 or 5 guys, chances are 2 or 3 of them are going to be pretty good contributors in the fall. It just feels like on the one hand, they're going to miss Sean Clifford. They're going to miss PJ. I think they're really going to miss Jair Brown. They're going to miss Brenton Strange, Scruggs. But I also think that they have so much coming back, and they've been able to kind of almost retool on the fly. So I can understand why the freshmen aren't maybe so nervous or anxious about, or wanting to relive what happened early in January, because they have a lot on the table ahead of them, and they still are chasing some very lofty goals, both team and individual wise. So I do think it just seems like it's a little bit different. I do like to hear that from them, but I feel like I don't know how much. I don't know if leadership is going to be as big of a factor by the time August rolls around.
Yeah, I think by then you would have seen guys like Nick Singleton or Drew Allar, even Zane Durant talking to the freshman, now a sophomore. I keep calling these guys, they're not freshmen anymore. Yeah. Zane Durant for a good bit there on Tuesday afternoon, and he was rattling off names of guys who in that 2022 recruiting class who have grown into their voice or who he expects to grow into their voice. And one thing that he noted, and I thought it was interesting, and something that I think this class understands too, is that, you don't become a leader by just talking a lot. You become a leader, especially in locker rooms, during the week, throughout practice, doing your job during practice, but performing on game day. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why the 2022 season was so important for this Penn State program moving forward. Guys like Dennis Sutton and Singleton and Allar getting in, Katron Allen, Abdul Carter, the names keep rolling, Drew Shelton. These are players that came in as true freshmen, made such a huge impact on an 11-2 season. And throughout that run last season, you could kind of feel among the fan base, it's like, hey, this is a lot of fun when they're beating up on Indiana and Maryland, when they're doing the thing against Minnesota at the whiteout, but and capping it against Utah in the Rose Bowl. And there's an understanding, there's an appreciation for the seniors that were on that team, but there was also an excitement because, hey, we're doing this as a program with all these young pieces in place and playing such a big role. And so I think as this offseason goes on, as these winter workouts go on, especially for the guys who were early enrollees this time last year, getting acclimated to the program, that they're just going to take that next step ahead into spring camp. And you still have older players on this team. I think Olu Fashanu is going to grow into more of a role. Guys like Sal Wormley and Landon Tengwall. Just talking about the offensive line there, but there are pieces on the defensive side of the ball. Kalen King. We can keep rattling players off, but I think this freshman class from 2022, now sophomores, this is going to be a youth movement. This is going to be a group that is going to be able to lead this team in the 2023 and 2024. Yeah.
You mentioned Kalen King on defense. I also think Chop Robinson, it'll be his second year at Penn State, third year though as a player at this level, and obviously Curtis Jacobs, who is a very interesting. I really enjoy. I know you do too. Really enjoy talking to Curtis because he's about as honest as up front and up front as it gets. A lot like Tig was. Great sense of humor, but I do think there's some leaders that are going to step to the front. Let's talk a little bit about though. They are turning the page with Sean Clifford after 4 years as a starter. He was in the program for 6 years. And there is not really a veteran quarterback in the room. There's not going to be. It's going to be Drew if he's healthy. Bo Prabula is a guy that I think is going to get a lot of work. But just that whole dynamic of, I think the fans are really anxious just to learn as much as possible about Drew Allar this spring and this summer. What I like about him already, and he's got a lot of room to grow, is that he does seem very comfortable dealing with the media already. Now, yeah, there hasn't been a bad word written about him yet. So, I mean, things can always change. But I just looking at him yesterday, listening to him talk, asked a lot of different questions. I was actually struck, Johnny, just by how young he still looks. I don't know if you have that opinion. He still looks every bit of like an 18-year-old kid. I don't know if he's turned 19 yet, but he's a gifted kid. But you can just tell he has not finished, or not even really started, really to fill out and just become, just a physical. I think about where Christian Hackenberg was in his second year, and it just looks like Drew. The upside is just so impressive, but I just think another year of weight training and another year of working with Mike Yurcich, and just the first year of getting, first team reps in spring and in summer, I think should really do wonders for him, as will the decision by James and Mike to play him in 10 games, to play him in some big games. He actually was in a couple of big spots, especially right out of the gate, and he looked very comfortable against Purdue. But I just think that that'll probably be, if not the top storyline, it'll probably be 1A. How is he looking? How is he handling things? How is Mike Yurcich, kind of coaching him this year differently? But I think he's going to be fascinating to watch. And I do think it's important not to forget about Bo Prabula, because I do think they really like him too.
Yeah, definitely. You can't forget about Bo. And he's someone that I was able to talk to on Tuesday, just about his mentality, his approach. I asked him if it's different anytime this year as opposed to last year, and he said that it isn't. He came in as an enrollee and just wanted to learn and be a sponge and just kind of take on as much information as possible. And he's approaching it the same way. Yeah. And he's going to have opportunities. He's going to have increased reps, whether that's, he was, primarily working with the scout team throughout the fall. And so now at the very least, getting number 2 reps. And as we expected to be, Drew, given the reps and the experience that he gained in the fall, and getting him in 10 games and getting him in, with Sean Clifford going out, getting him in with the Purdue game. But, from that point on, getting him a drive down at Auburn, like we talked about this so many times before, but that experience will do him wonders. And having that tape, having that, we talk about mental reps and everything that, Mike Yurcich liked about Sean Clifford is that he can go back and mentally, check with, hey, what did I do against this team, this year or whatever. To have those reps and that film already for Drew in this offseason, when he has downtime to be able to go back and look and see what he did, at Indiana, I think that's invaluable. And so you said it might be, or we think it probably is the top storyline. It is the top storyline is Drew Allar in this quarterback position, because this 2022 class that has already seen so many contributors, they were sold, I'm sure, by James Franklin and his staff of, hey, you can be the class that really turns a tie for us. I don't know if they were discussing a 12-team playoff or not, but that's upcoming, and they've got plans to make the top 4 in 2023. They haven't been shy about that at all, and that's not just the freshmen. That's guys like Theo Johnson and older players as well. They've already won the Rose Bowl now, and they want to take that next step. And Drew is going to be integral to that if they're going to do that this upcoming season. And I think everyone in the building knows it. I think everyone knows that he has the talent to do it. It's just a matter of putting that together and, working throughout the offseason. So I think it's going to be a huge winter workout, period for him, huge spring practice, and then going into that summer ahead of training camp.
Yeah. There was 2 30-minute sessions of the second year players that really weren't available other than Rose Bowl Media Day, and that was just kind of like a crazy scene because it was just too cramped and too quick. But extended time to talk to pretty much anyone that was a freshman last year. And let's just go maybe give a couple of thoughts on a couple of guys. You mentioned Singleton. He was physically impressive, Johnny, last year as a January enrollee. He looks even better. I mean, he just looks like he is ready. He looks bigger. I talked about Drew. Maybe he could kind of put on a little bit more weight and fill out. Nick looks good. I think Penn State's good with where Nick is. Nick is physically, but I was going to say, deny Dennis Sutton, somebody I got a chance to talk to, also absolutely looks like he is ready to physically roll this year. Now that there's going to be a little bit more playing time on the depth chart, and like he came in late last year, and they were pretty good at defense. The first 2 or 3 defensive ends, they were pretty good. I'm really anxious to see him. He looks great. 2 notes for me though. I got to talk to Katron Allen for the first time, and I would just say to Penn State fans, if you ever get a chance to meet Katron, it's going to be an experience. He's he's a guy that you're going to want to talk to for multiple reasons. But it's just a funny give and take because, James Franklin made a big deal last year about him losing 20 pounds and playing at 201. Last year when he was at 220 when he got to Penn State. They've updated the roster. They haven't updated the weights. And I said, Katron, you're not 201 pounds. He goes, no. I said, he goes, I really never was. I said, well, what do you weigh right now? He goes, 219. So he is, he looks good. One other note, Mekhi Flowers, the kid from the Harrisburg area, safety. It's a crowded safety room, even without Jair Brown back, right? Keaton Ellis is a veteran, between Jalen Reed and Zakee Wheatley. Kevin Winston's another guy that played. But one of the problems, Mekhi Flowers was extremely thin last year when he showed up. He said when he got to campus, he weighed 179. He said he's up to about 196 now. He looks like he's ready because he was a pretty coveted recruit. He's definitely an athlete. He looks like he is ready to maybe take a big swing at trying to get some playing time at safety or on special teams. So I always kind of like to note to see what has been like the physical transformation between, in a year, who looks like maybe they weren't ready to play physically, because that's a big deal, and who looks like they are now. But Nick Singleton looked great last year. That has not changed. Katron's back up to like the weight he was kind of when they recruited him and brought him in. And Mekhi's a guy that looks like he's ready now, maybe to do some things at safety.
Yeah, and to just paint a picture for the listeners on what this setup was like, let's go back first of all to the Rose Bowl when we were not able to talk to these freshmen at all during the 2022 season. That's James Franklin's policy, one that's implemented, at most places across the country. But the Rose Bowl institutes say, hey, the entire roster is available for this media day. And so they decide like how their setup was. They cram like 4 or 5 players at a circular table. And so you've got, 4 or 5, maybe even more reporters in the case of Drew Allar, just crowding around this table, and other players are sitting there, and it's a little awkward. Yeah. This was a lot better. This was 2 30-minute sessions where the 2022 class was split in half. Each player got their own table, and so you could have just better, banter, better conversation. It was just made their lives better, I'm sure, than just being hounded and crowded. But while there was a crowd around Drew Allar's table, and you were among them because we split up the players, I was able to just go freely and talk to other people. I'm like, this is kind of nice. Yeah. And one of the players I was able to talk to during that session was Caden Saunders, wide receiver, blue chip guy coming in. Had a lot of expectations externally, and he thought that he would come in and perform right away. And that's the kind of pedigree that he came in with. Every school in the country wanted Caden Saunders in their wide receiver room. But he was honest. He admitted that coming in, he enjoyed the last bits of his high school days a little bit too much. He said, he didn't come in, his body composition wasn't where he wanted it to be. And he had a close relationship with Taylor Stubblefield, the now fired wide receivers coach, who recruited him, and they had honest conversations about, hey, you're not where you need to be. And so for him to work through the summer and start to gain his body, where he wants to be physically, he feels like now going into these winter workouts and this spring camp that he has a real chance to make an impact in 2023. And it's an interesting group, with Marcus Hagens coming in as a new wide receivers coach. It's kind of a fresh start for the guys in the room. Parker Washington, Mitchell Tinsley no longer there. You're bringing in Dante Cephas, who is still taking classes at Kent State, and he'll enroll in the summer. Malik McNeil from Florida State is taking classes, and has already looked pretty good. James Franklin and Higgins both said that they've been impressed with McLean, but it feels like with Drew Allar coming in at quarterback, you already know what you got in running back. Their offensive line is set, but the tight end is solid with Theo Johnson, Tyler Warren in that group. Wide receiver is kind of wide open, no pun intended. And so there's an opportunity there for Caden Saunders to step in, and he feels like he's in a really good spot to do that. And so, being able to talk to him, like I talked to Abdul Carter for a while, story coming on him later this week, just on his expectations for himself. And, he wasn't surprised by his own performances last year, becoming a freshman All-American, pretty much a consensus freshman All-American, living up to that number 11 jersey. He talked a little bit about his relationship with Micah Parsons, going to the big wrestling match a couple weeks ago, and sitting mat side with Micah and picking his brain. And so plenty more to come on PennLive.com. For subscribers, you got to check that out. But no, it was a good session to be able to talk with these guys and just get a feel for where they're at, going into their sophomore seasons. And it's going to take a group effort to get where Penn State wants to go. And so whether that's, Mekhi Flowers, contributing in a rotational role in the secondary on special teams, or Caden Saunders, making a jump and providing, some burst in the passing game. It's going to take all these guys as a collective to get done what they want to get done. And so, and it gives us a heck of a lot of content, during a pretty dead time right now, because it's not like we're at winter workouts and all that. So, it was a good afternoon, and a lot more to come too.
Carter is another guy that not only looks like he is ready for year 2, but he looks like he's ready for the NFL physically. Right, I gotta say, I'm trying to remember. Micah in year 2 certainly was a guy that he was ready. This guy physically is absolutely. There haven't been many linebackers at Penn State look like Abdul Carter looks right now. Prior to his second year, he looks like. If he was good last year, between the experience and I think he's gotten a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger, and a little bit more comfortable, I can only imagine what Manny Diaz is going to do with him with spring install. And it's just like having, I'm sure Manny's going to be like a kid in the candy store, because you can use him so many different ways. To be his size and to move like he does, I mean, you're just talking about a very special player. Looking forward, Johnny, to seeing him. Let's just circle back, though, to some of the guys that are not coming back with an eye toward the scouting combine. So Penn State has seven people, seven former players have got combine invites. It's going to start, I think, at the very end of February, carry into the first week in March in Indianapolis. I think, Johnny, before they announced the list, if you would have told us there was going to be 7 Lions invited, I think we probably would have been absolutely locked in on 6 of them. We might have had a different guess on the 7th one. I wasn't overly surprised by who got to make it. I was pleased they got 7. But your thoughts? It was 4 offensive players, 2 wideouts: Mitchell Tinsley, Parker Washington, Brenton Strange, Juice Scruggs; 3 defensive players: Jair Brown, Joey Porter, and of course PJ Mustipher. Anything stand out to you about them getting 7?
No, I'm not surprised that Sean Clifford didn't get the nod. There's a lot of quarterbacks that need to be evaluated, and he'll have his pro day. All these guys will have their pro day. What they end up doing out in Indianapolis, in terms of workouts, like we'll have to wait and see. But the one that jumps off the list to me, because Jair was a given, Joey Porter was a given, I think PJ was, and Brenton, like these guys are, Parker, they were studs at Penn State and they deserve to be invited, and all these guys deserve to be invited. The one that stood out to me, though, was Mitchell Tinsley, and I think just he has done a lot for himself over the last 12 months, coming to Penn State as a transfer from Western Kentucky, getting acclimated to that offense, and really being not more than a security blanket, but he definitely played that role on third down for Sean Clifford this past season. Just made a lot of big catches, and in the Rose Bowl specifically, to be able to cap his college career that way. And then during this pre-draft process so far has really done well. You see clips of him all the time at the I forget which All-Star game. I always get the names mixed up. There's the Hula Bowl, there's the East West, there's all these different bowls. But he was at one of them, and he was doing really well. You see his clips on Twitter all the time, and he was embarrassing a couple of corners with his route running. And so he's an older, experienced guy, and I think he could fly under the radar as a nice pickup for some NFL team that's looking for a route technician, because he made himself some money so far this pre-draft process, and I think he has a chance to do it in Indy as well, as do all of these guys. And a lot of eyes will be on Joey Porter Jr., who right now is going in the first round, firmly in the first round, potentially a top 10, 15 pick once April rolls around, which would be a pretty big deal for him. Obviously would be a pretty big deal for Penn State to be able to hit the recruiting trail and say, hey, kid from Pittsburgh, we developed him into a first round pick. They haven't had a defensive back go in the first round. So yeah, this would be a big deal for them, but interested to see how all these guys play and perform out at the combine. And then again at Pro Day at Haluba Hall a few weeks later.
Yeah, Mitch. And the thing about Mitch is so he didn't take the easy road to get to the combine. Junior college player, Western Kentucky, not exactly a known program. Had a solid, I think, first year there, and then had a breakout 1,400 yard year his final year there. I know they threw the ball like 92.3% of every play, but just watching him at Penn State, I don't know, Johnny. I don't know if I saw him drop a pass in a game. If he did, I could probably count on like two fingers the amount of drops. Just a guy that Sean trusted on third down, a guy that found the end zone in big games. His first game, I think, at Purdue, he scored in the Rose Bowl. When Parker Washington went down, I think he definitely raised his level of play. And I don't know where that that game was a month ago that you're talking about, like on the NFL trail. I think it was in the Rose Bowl. Again, I'm just not sure what the official name was, but he
might have been the East-West Shrine Bowl.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure on that, though.
He was wearing out some defensive backs. I saw the clips too. I just wanted to add, I'm really happy for Juice Scruggs because he really had a significant medical issue, early in his Penn State career. I think with car accident, back injury, a little bit touch and go. It was a significant injury, and it really set him back. He was a member of, I think, the 18 class that really liked him. But, to go through that early in your career, you're basically, not only the physical part, but mentally to bounce back, knowing that you probably put yourself, a good 18 months behind the eight ball, trying to establish a role at Penn State. And they're bringing in guys every year, very patient, started to play a little bit in 2020, the COVID year, then got a starting job, earned a starting job in 2021 at guard, played center in the Outback Bowl. And then honestly, I don't think that's that easy of a switch considering all the things that centers have to do to go from guard to center. But I just thought early in 2022, Johnny, he looked very confident, not only playing, but also the communication aspect of it. I think he was a team captain as well, popular among all of his teammates, but really happy. I think of all the players, Jair's another one who hasn't had an easy road to get where he's at. But just from the physical standpoint, for what Juice had to overcome to get to the NFL scouting combine and, hopefully get a look in the NFL, a long look, maybe as a draft choice. I think that's a great story. It's a tribute to him. And he's a guy that I think it's easy for Penn State fans to root for.
Absolutely. And like you mentioned, the players love Juice. Every time you ask someone, and I did this a lot, going towards the end of the season where your mind starts shifting a little bit towards like, hey, who are they going to lose here? Like, who's going to leave? Whenever you would ask players, who is maybe overlooked on this roster or whatever, the consistent answer was Juice Scruggs. And in terms of, Sean Clifford was one who, talk about a 6-year senior and someone who has seen it all. And he really harped on Juice in terms of his impact on not only the offense and the offensive line, but on the team overall in that locker room and the culture and all that you're trying to establish within a program that, Juice played a big part of that. All these guys did. Jair Brown was the heartbeat of this defense. And, I remember asking Manny Diaz about Jair before the Michigan game, which obviously did not turn out well for Penn State whatsoever. But it was a quote that I had just kind of logged and held until I did a story on Jair later in the year. And it was one that Manny Diaz is just like, you as a coach, you just hope to be able to coach a player like a Jair Brown. Like guys like that don't come around often. And when they do, you cherish them. And so I do think Penn State's going to miss Jair Brown. I think they're going to miss Joey Porter Jr. and Juice. And these guys who are going to be at the combine. It is a lot of lost production. But again, as we mentioned earlier in the podcast and many times, on this podcast, that there's just so much optimism around this young group. And, you expect Hunter Norzad to move over to center and be able to perform in place of Juice Scruggs, assuming that's what they do. You expect Kalen King and Johnny Dixon and Storm Duck, the transfer from North Carolina, to be able to fill in admirably in the secondary as they have in the past. And so Zakee Wheatley, Jalen Reed, and Keaton Ellis filling in for Jair Brown. Now, you have the pieces and you've developed depth. And I go back to what James Franklin said after the Purdue game. He said, we want to develop depth. That is our goal. That is a primary goal this year. And that's what they did in 2022. And it's going to pay dividends seeing these older guys move on into 2023.
Yeah, the two things that stand out to me, that would be one of them. The commitment. The commitment. He didn't it wasn't lip service. He said it early. He said, we are going to play our young players. And I think more so than any other year, he did that. Maybe he had a really good feeling about what he had in the room, but those guys were in every game playing. A lot of them playing significant snaps. That and the renaissance of the running game and the commitment in the spring of 2022 to say, look, man, they didn't even have an offensive line really in spring. They were guys that were either injured. They had like 4 or 5 bodies, but they said coming out of spring they felt really good about where the running game was. James would joke and say, I'm going to let you guys decide how the offensive line played. It was kind of a running joke all year, but it wasn't a joke, right? It wasn't a joke by the time November rolled around. And now they have so many talented young players when it comes to offensive linemen. It's really neat to see them be able to kind of flip the script. But those two things are going to stand out to me about last season, and I'm sure it's going to carry over, Johnny, to this year. We have so much to talk about that we're out of time here on this episode of the Blue White Breakdown. But between the true freshmen or the second year players we got a chance to talk to yesterday, Marcus Haynes, we didn't really get to talk Higgins, we didn't really get a chance to talk about what he had to say. I also thought James had some very interesting things to talk about, his expectations for the wideout room and the wideout coaching. I think we can get into that on our next podcast, as well as some more stuff about the freshmen. But they're the second-year players. I keep calling them freshmen. I'm with you. I can't.
I know.
It's freshmen until they play in September, but they're really not. So until we meet again, Johnny, and I have a feeling it's going to be fairly soon, we really have a lot to get to. I know you're excited to talk about it. So, guys, we'll be back fairly soon to talk more about Penn State as it gets ready for spring practice, and it's really not that far away. It's going to be exciting, and I hope you guys stick around next week when we come back.